It's Friday morning. I'm super stoked. We got a lot to cover today. I want to talk to you about repeating patterns. So, like, why do we want to talk about repeating patterns? Because, like, when can you really use a repeating pattern, right? Well, there's a ton of areas that you can use repeating patterns. You can do it for tissue. You can do it for, like, just think of anything where you want maybe your logo or you want an artwork, like a big full wrap, maybe a texture. There's so many different areas that you can use repeating patterns. Definitely want to kind of cover that and show you how to do it. There's some cool tips and tricks in Illustrator, but as cool and fun as they may be, they don't necessarily work as well as you'd like them to. Not at least for what we do in packaging. So I'm going to show you just a quick example of like a repeating pattern, like when you could use it and when it makes sense to have it. This is from my friends over at IDP Direct. And you can see this pattern. I mean, it's a foil stamp. So there's texture, there is foil, it repeats, and then they've got an area on top of it that knocks out, right, where you don't see the pattern. Super easy to do. So these are the types of things that we want to show, and I'll show it again here. You can kind of take a look at how this repeats. You can see that pattern just is continual. So you can actually, you can either create this independently in Illustrator, where you take each piece and you step it out, and then you repeat it vertically, horizontally, make sure everything aligns. That's never, that's like one way to do it. It's a pain. Then there's another way, which is actually using the Illustrator app to step it out and do all the work for you, which is awesome. But again, it all depends on how you're printing this. So for example, the example that I shared there is a foil stamp, right? So typically that's going to be a stamping process where they're going to make a plate. So in that case, your repeating pattern doesn't have to be perfect. The spacing between each one of those elements doesn't have to be exactly the same. Not that you would want it to be off, but if it was off for some reason, it doesn't have to be at a specific repeating length. Now, you could be doing something in, let's say, a tissue, right? So a tissue paper or a gift wrap. This stuff is printed with a cylinder. So you've got a circumference to deal with. They're not always the same types of cylinders. So it could be a 5-inch cylinder circumference. It could be 7 inches, which means that now your repeating pattern has to match up every 7 inches or every 5 inches. So there's a real specificity there. And you've got to decide that before you get started in the design process. We're always kind of working on the fly here, so we got to figure out how best to show you the entire screen. All right, so now you can see the entire screen, which means you can see the file, you can see edit, object, all the navigation on top. So we select this, go to object, scroll down, repeat. Do we want to repeat it as a radial or grid? For this, you're going to do a grid. So you click on that. Automatically, you've got a full repeat happening here. You can stretch this out. You can grab these little arrows and pull this down as far as you want. This little lever here will take it all the way out this way. Done. You got a repeating pattern in like 3 seconds. Now, it's a ugly repeating pattern. So what you want to do is you can get into your properties. There we go. We get into our properties window. And down at the bottom, you've got repeating options. So you can space out how far you want the repeat to happen. You can also grab this little arrow here at the top. You can tighten. You can space them out. You can do the same thing vertically. Tight. Loose. Right, so super, super easy. This works if you're doing an all-over print of something, but when it comes to something that's going to be printed with a cylinder, this is definitely not the way to do it. But you can do a bunch of fun stuff in here. You can change the pattern over here in the properties. There's grid type. You can change the grid, which is more of like a brick pattern. You can see it changes. So now you've got packaging U, packaging on box, packaging U, versus just having it repeating the same thing vertically. You go column by column. You kind of change them out a little bit. This is kind of nice. But it's using the entire block that you had before. I kind of like this one. You can also change the spacing here. Like I said, you can change the spacing here. there's these flip rows, which allows you to flip artwork. If it was anything but type, this would be great because it changes the direction of the artwork. So you've got a little bit of a differentiation happening in the pattern. With text, obviously now everything is wrong reading, so it doesn't necessarily work great. This one, now we flipped it. So now you can read packaging. Now it's upside down. So you can click both of those, or we can unclick these and go to columns. Now we flip the column and then flip it again. So you kind of have to just play around with these buttons. So this gives you the pattern in a bunch of different ways. It's all one color. If you wanted to, for example, make a change to this, bless you, if you guys can hear that, somebody's sneezing in the background. Right, we can grab all of this. Let's change this color, see what happens. We're going to go to a yellow. So every instance of that logo has changed. Right, so another quick way to make these changes in this thing. But let's take a look at why this is not the way to do it. Let's zoom out here. So if we're doing a 20 by 30 tissue that's printed by a cylinder, let's say the cylinder is 7 inches in circumference. I'm going to click here. We've got 7 inches on the clock. So let's take a look. So every 7 inches, you've got packaging, and then you've got this, the U happening here. If I bring this over to 7 inches, then this is what the actual pattern is going to look like. Every time that cylinder rotates, it's going to look like this, which is not what you want, right? This is absolutely not what you want. So the best way to do it, and you can go in here and you can kind of adjust this thing and fine tune until everything lines up where you want it to, but it's never going to be precise. So what I prefer to do is to start here. If I start with whatever the circumference of the cylinder is, that's my width, then my tissue height. And for tissue, you're probably going to have a little bit of a bleed. It depends on who you're working with. It's never a ton. It's maybe like 1/8 of an inch, max 1/4 of an inch. They're never going to print to the edge of the roll. And typically the roll is going to be like 40 inches versus 20 inches. And then they split it down the middle. So anything in the middle that gets split, you're going to have one edge that actually touches. So that means like your artwork's going to go right up against that edge and then get cut. But on the outside edges, your art's going to stop. So you've got some kind of a gripper happening there. So if we're starting here, you can put your artwork here. It's 6 p.m. in Switzerland. My kids are playing, so I got some to watch a bit here. Yeah, thanks, Steve. I totally know what it's like. I had to rush my kids out to school this morning. I've got one that is like super on time and on task, and she's like ready to go at the door. And then I've got the other one that is like 30 minutes later. She's like, I don't want to get dressed today. And getting her out of the house is a lot of fun, I can tell you. All right, so we've got this thing here. So we can copy, we can paste it directly in front. We can step it out. We're going to go 7 inches, 0. Right, that means that every time this artwork and the cylinder rotates, it's going to line up perfectly, right? Now you can take this, you've got a 7-inch gap happening here. You can move it wherever we want to. So that's one way to do it. Now, if we wanted to have this artwork somewhere in the middle, we can twist it if we wanted to. So we can twist if we wanted to. If we want to bring this in here, now we're out of the order. So that means we've got to actually resize this. So let's go ahead and resize this down here, and let's step this thing out. All right, and you can come over here. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and align these guys so they're aligned. But I don't want to have this piece on this end because it's going to be touching this one, right? So we'll bring this in just a little bit. Right, and I'm just eyeballing it. All right, so now I'm going to copy this, paste it in front, scoot it over 7 inches. All right, there we go. This isn't perfect, but you get the idea. So now you can take this artwork and you can move it whichever direction you want because everything is spaced out those 7 inches. So if we wanted to do this, we can do that. If we wanted to take this art here and put it in the middle, then we can do that. And what we do is we get rid of this. We don't need that stuff anymore. And we don't need this over here either. So we can actually take all of this, we can copy it, scoot it over 7 inches, paste, move. Now you've got a full repeating pattern. And it really depends on who you're using for your manufacturing, right? If you can talk to them before you start designing, because sometimes I'll get artwork from clients and it's beautiful. Let's say, for example, they've created something and they're like, I want my repeating pattern to be just really random, having these logos in different directions, just whatever. Like they want something that's crazy like this. It's not impossible, but it takes planning, right? And you saw that I just threw this together. So don't judge me. Or you can't judge me. I don't know. You can take this. Say, for example, they've taken this here, and knowing that you're repeating every 7 inches or 5 inches, whatever that circumference is. This isn't impossible, but the way that it's going to work is a little bit different. I'm going to show you. I've done some really fun wraps like this. I did some stuff for Barney's and Sarah Jessica Parker. They had this illustration of her and all these different models. And it was tissue. And they're like, we just want this to repeat. And it was a huge artwork. And it's like, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to have to change everything. Even though you're working on a cylinder, it's still a plate. So it's a flat plate that wraps around a cylinder. So typically you're going to have a flat edge on either side, and then those come together and join in the middle. Knowing that you're using a flat plate and that you're going to wrap it and join it, you can get a little bit funky with it. And I don't know exactly where this is going to land in terms of the repeat, but let's try it here. So let's say it's 7 inches. And this is not even close, right? We've got this U here. That one's happening there. But what you can do is you can go and do something like this. Right? You can kind of carve around these guys. So essentially what you're doing, what you're carving around is, imagine that this is the actual metal plate that you're going to be using to print your tissue that's going to wrap around the cylinder. Okay, so now this, you've got a flat plate, you've cut it. Now it's going to come and it's going to join together like that. So we're going to take this, we're going to copy it, we're going to paste it in front. We're going to step out 7 inches. That's 7 inches. So you can do something like that. Now, all this excess stuff over here. And I threw this together so it doesn't necessarily line up properly. Not necessarily, it just doesn't. But you can move these guys around now. So you can have a little bit more of a variety happening inside of this tissue, inside of this repeating pattern. I'm just kind of cleaning these guys up here. Anything outside of this is not something you want to use. So now we've got this. It's wavy, it's funky, but actually what you're just doing is you're going to just take it. One out, then they want in again. You can hear them barking back there. Right, so that's just what's happening. Every time that wheel rotates, that cylinder rotates, it's just aligning. Now you can have something that's funky. It doesn't have to line up vertically in terms of those 7 inches. You can get funky with the wave and how you do that. We got Rick. Absolutely agree. People always forget that you have to account for the plate cylinder on the press. This is like the most important part, right? If you're doing any type of repeating pattern, you've got to figure out what that circumference is, but you can push those boundaries. You can get a little bit weird. You can play with that. You can shape it and cut it. It's a pain in the butt to kind of to do on the production side. But honestly, every production person that I've worked with, everybody that's been on press, actually enjoys the challenge because it's not the same old flat plate they're working with. I think it's kind of the same way we all do it, right? We all want a challenge. So just a real quick recap. We've got just a quick recap. We've got just your standard plate. If we're hot stamping, right, we're pressing down on something. If you're just doing an offset print, then whatever the size of your plate is, not your plate, but the size of the sheet that your machine's able to accept, you can work with that. It definitely, doesn't make a difference. But if you're doing like a repeating, something like that's roll to roll, right, where you take a huge roll of paper and it runs through the press and then it rolls up again on the other side, or it gets cut on the other side. So it's just an infinite loop of the artwork. This is what you've got to think about. First thing you got to ask is what cylinder size are they using? And sometimes they'll give you an option. Oh, we've got a 5-inch circumference, 7-inch circumference, whatever that is. Take a look at your artwork, lay it out, put in those dimensions, see what makes the most sense for you artwork you're using. Rick here says it's fun at times. It is. It's a lot of fun when you're able to challenge the pressman and give them something a little bit different to work with. Because, man, when you're running those presses and it's the same old setup, clean, you're not having something to like actually think through. I mean, there's a lot to think through when you're running those presses, but just something a little bit different is fun. I think it's fun for anybody. And when you get that pressman involved in your process and you're like, okay, this is what I want to do. What have you seen in the past? How can we get this? How can we push this design further? They're going to give you better results because they're going to be focused. They're going to be invested in this. And I'd say from a sales perspective, like this is a big thing that I do is when I talk to a brand, when I talk to an agency, I'm not only talking to the creative and focusing on the design, I'm talking to finance, I'm talking to procurement at a client. I'm getting them involved. I'm asking them like, what do you think is important for the design? What can we do to meet your budget? And they're going to come back and go, what if we do 2 colors? What if we do 1 color? It makes a huge, huge difference. Lisa, she's learned a ton from the pressman. That's they know what's happening on the final end. They're the ones who are going to tell you those colors are going to suck on that paper, or they're going to tell you, we should do it this way or that way. And it's going to change the way that you approach your design. It's a huge, huge difference. Definitely get involved with the pressman. Definitely get involved with, go on a press run, not just go to the machine, but go take a look at how they do CTP, what software they're using, who's outputting it, who's doing the intake of your artwork, and ask them, hey, when you receive my artwork, does it suck? Right? Because they're not going to tell you it sucks. But if you ask them, does it suck? They're going to, yeah, it sucks. You sent me a file with 47 layers, totally unlabeled. You got RGB, CMYK, random spots in here. And be like, oh, well, okay, show me what should I do differently? Ask. Don't be afraid to ask. Don't ever assume that you're the smartest person in the room. Always assume, I always assume I'm the dumbest person in the room when I get in there. I'm like, hey, how do you run this machine? Where does it even plug in? How do you do this? What software are you using? And people just share, and you're going to get little nuggets that you're going to tuck away. And when you're designing something the next time, you're going to be like, oh yeah, I remember that. She said to do it this way, right? The best way to prep the files, right? And you can check out, I've got another class that I've done here showing how to prep files. Not super in depth, but definitely helps kind of figure out how to set up your files and colors. But definitely get a huge learning from the people that are running the equipment. Like I said, when I'm talking to a client, I don't always focus on the creative. I focus on everybody else. The reason for that is if they buy into the project, if finance has given their opinion on the design or on the color, ways to help reduce cost, they're bought in, right? If procurement says, we did a project like this before, but we had to make these changes because they know, because it has to hit the budget. And you take that into consideration, they've bought into the project. The more people on the team that you're working with that buy into the project, the better chances of you actually completing this project are going to be. Same goes for the production side. The more that you talk to the pressmen, everybody on the team that's actually producing this, get their feedback, take some of the guidance that they give you. Don't set up your file this way, set up this way. If we're going to be doing a cylinder, you can do that wavy cut. You can do some of these other things, and you incorporate that into your design. They're bought in because now it's their advice that's gotten you to this point. Not asking you to let them design it for you, but definitely ask for more input from different people on the client side and different people on the production side, so that your design can actually be functional and you've got everybody that's involved in it actually caring for it. When we work with pre-press department, it makes life so much easier. 100%, Rick. Anytime that you're working with design, if you talk to pre-press, they're the ones that are going to tell you, because if you show, again, I've had files arrive where it's like 70 plus layers. Some things are grouped, some layers are actually groups of groups. And it takes, it can take you like 3 to 4 days to process a file properly. When it's that complicated, right? Because you're turning things off and things are disappearing. Sometimes you're turning things on that shouldn't even be in there. And you've got to print it out, you've got to check it, you've got to go through the whole process. If your designer is talking to the production people, production's going to say, hey, do it this way. And they're not going to tell you this because they love you. They're going to tell you this because it's going to save them time, right? They don't want to make a mistake because you left 3 layers that were turned off that should have been turned on, or vice versa. And they flip it on, and all of a sudden you're going to production with something that's wrong because they made a mistake making an assumption on your part. So always work with the production team. That's it for today, guys. I super appreciate everybody joining and all the questions. Lisa, it's always great to talk to you and see you. Rick, thanks for joining. We got a ton of you guys out here. We got Karen, Dan, appreciate you guys. Joseph, really, really appreciate you guys joining. Hope this helps. If you guys have any comments, keep posting them on here. If you've ever done tissue, post a comment with your tissue or any kind of repeating pattern that you've done. Would love to see it and share it with everybody else that's watching the show. So thanks so much. Have a great weekend. I can't believe it's Friday. Super stoked. All right, guys. See ya.